welcome back. And we're moving into our final conversation for today. We can say that we're very happy that he's joining us actually on the day he returns back to Jamaica. Dr. Herbert Gayle, he's an anthropologist, and he is well known in Belize for his study that was published in 2010 on understanding masculinity and male violence in Belize. Good morning, Dr. Gayle, and thank you for joining us.
Morning.
So I want to start off, I was asking you before, the study that was published in 2010 was a very important one, and you brought out some information I think that we had long needed to have verbalized in this country.
Right.
You told us that you continuously monitor what's happening in the country,
Right.
and I want to just start off with your initial reaction in seeing where we are today, 8 years after the publishing of that study.
Mm-hmm. Well, your infrastructure is better because I remember when we came here, one of the concerns we had was how many people were living in and around morass areas or swamps, as we say here. That seemed to have been, it's dwindling. The London bridges are not as dramatic anymore. So you are actually putting in infrastructure. And I want to remind people that you're a very young state, so don't be too aggressive on the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure. I notice your highways, they're developing, so you're getting there. My concern, though, is that on the social side, people still haven't come together. I remember Restore Belize was designed to do this, and there have been other groups and you have also Ministry of Youth, you have. Those are some of the recommendations. So you have made steps forward, but the actors involved. See, every context has time, place, and actors, and specifically the relations of production within, and I break it down for everybody, within the frame of the actors. In other words, in any human ecology, in any environment, everybody must be playing a role, and that role must be going towards solving the problem of violence. Now, the problem I'm seeing, and yesterday I couldn't, my eyes are trained, so I see everything, was people, having discourses that were competing, not in an academic sense, because academics are cutthroat. We compete all the time, but that's for the fun of it. There's no bloodletting. But people were literally angry at each other, and these are the social service providers. So if the gangs depend on a segmentary factional frame, which means that they organize themselves around competing for scraps. Because if you don't have scraps, you don't have gangs, If you give everybody basic education, basic everything, then you can't have gangs because there's no scraps to fight over. This is the idea. Anywhere you find gangs, there are poverty, poor education system, there are a series of stuff that must exist for gangs to be, and broken families. Now, what I'm seeing is that the social service providers, the people who say we are here to help alleviate the pressure on these young people and to give them what we call ontological security, which means a sense of tomorrow, they themselves are no factional, as in they're having beef, real beef, as in real anger on the faces about who should be doing what and who not doing what, and so forth. And already we know the Caribbean is the second most factional place on earth. The LAC is less than 10% of the world. Latin America and the Caribbean. And we account for 40% of murders. So it's not the best place for our social service providers, as in the social workers and all of these people, to be having beef openly with each other. I think they have to find a way to come together under some umbrella and move forward together as a team, because you don't have enough resources to split it up into pieces.
Doctor, referring to the social partners.
Yes.
But I don't know if you've been monitoring, but there appears to be a authoritative beef as well, because we have beef between various ministers. We had a switch from one minister of police to the next, and that surely has caused some unease politically in there. And because you're talking about the way that these partners that are around start to mimic the gangs,
Yeah.
but we also have the DPP's office. We have the Director of Public Prosecution, who has almost declared very polite war. When I say polite in terms of the way she puts it, but the real beef between her and the police, where she keeps on saying, listen, if I fail, it's because the police have not done their job. Then the police come back and say, listen, well,
we didn't get instructions.
We didn't get
from
instructions.
DPP.
Yeah. So we're seeing that level of, as you were saying,
It's a lot of public conflict.
and beef.
Yeah.
But these things happen naturally. It's not that the people are bad.
Yeah.
It's a matter that when you live in a zone of violence, of war for very long, you begin to, the persons who are supposed to help, including even social workers and psychologists and even the shrink, everybody gets frustrated and blame each other because they can't accept the fact that I've been at this thing for 10, 15 years and nothing is changing.
Yeah.
So the first human thing to do is to lash out at the other person. But you see, I've said to people, and I want to remind people, we measure violence every 15 years, not every 5 years, which is an election. Not every year, which is what you get appraisal for at work. Yeah. Every 15 years, because 15 years is half of a generation. It's every 15 years because that is when you have DNA change. Because the next generation growing up must reflect the change in their DNA after you have helped. So a lot of these people who are frustrated and giving up, you're not even there yet. and snapping at each other. I mean, the snapping turtle thing, it does not help, because then you are saying, then a gang member says, look at them. Them have PhDs and master's degrees, and them worse than we. Yeah. You can't do that. At least come to the public and pretend. Yeah. I'm tired of telling people this. Come and be a hypocrite. Pretend you're okay.
Fake it till you make it.
Then you can go back and say, hey, no, we can't do this, you know?
Well, I think a part of what we see happening is people trying to ascribe blame to this problem.
Yeah.
You know, the society is overwhelmed when we hear of children and women and innocent people being targeted in what we have for long deemed a gang warfare. And it seems to be the primary blame usually goes to the police department, because there's a lot of conflict there.
Because they're the face of the state.
And we've also reflected even on your very own study where you spoke of that challenge there, the mistrust that existed. Yes. And then it moves on to social partners, and it then moves on to the government overall. And we seem to all be in a scenario where we just want to point a finger and keep it there.
Yeah, because we're tired.
Yeah, but I also find, on a personal level, it feels very counterproductive. You feel impotent. There's nothing you can do.
No, it's actually dangerous.
Yeah.
It's actually dangerous, and which is why one of the things I do when I go to make presentations to people who are working in the trenches is remember, don't war. Don't war among yourselves, because you see, when you're hungry, if you're warring and you're not hungry, can you imagine the man who's genuinely hungry, right? Who's there looking and waiting for a little spark just to blow up, right? Because they already have the fuel, they already have the hardship, they have everything, and they're waiting for a spark. And you walk up to them and provide them with a spark to explode. Yeah. No, it's not good. You have to step back. You know, I mean, I would never want to come back here and hear social service providers getting at each other like I saw them in just, I'm here 3 days. Yeah. And in 3 days I pick up that, you know, everybody's going at each other.
Is it a territorial
It's not
issue?
even that. It's not even territorial. It's just that they're tired and frustrated.
Yeah.
They're tired and frustrated. And
a
lot of them feel that I have been carrying too much when you could have been helping me, when you could have been doing the right thing. And in some cases, the people who are, like you listen to everybody and everybody is right. I don't know if you've ever been in that scenario. Everybody is right that the other one could have carried or done something different. But the point is that they would have been righter. Let me create a word. They'd been righter if they were working together. You know?
Yeah.
But, you know, we're tiptoeing around, in my opinion, we're tiptoeing around issues and sensibilities. Would I be completely, I know it'd probably be rude, but would I be completely inaccurate to say that we have a level of incompetence in dealing with these problems? You know, for the police department, take for example, we have been using just brute force, and we have a lull in it, and then we go back to the brute force. We have a
suppression.
Yes. When it comes
that's what the unit is called.
Yeah. And you know,
at least I respect them for the honesty.
Full disclosure from the start.
But we're not only talking about the police. Yeah. You spoke about the social partners.
Who are more important than the police.
Yeah.
In this context. I think context of reducing violence, they are the real people.
Yeah, but they fall under a wider umbrella.
When they make errors, those errors hit
But
hard.
we are proud of our Boost program and Pantry programs, which have been allowing for conditional cash transfers, hopefully to improve the lives of the poor. So I was using that as an example for the social partners that you're talking about.
Let me go to the issue of competence.
Yes,
right?
please.
Let's not skirt around it. Right?
Please.
All right. Violence is an extremely complex situation.
Yes.
99.9% of anybody over 15 years old in this country is a violence expert because they've seen it. So, but seeing violence doesn't make you an expert. You see, the means you're an expert at coping with it, which in itself doesn't help. So the problem I have is that we have 3 levels of violence address. Not violence, 3 levels of violence address. They're the primaries, the secondaries, and the tertiaries. The primaries are the things that prevent you. Those are the things that provide a country with ontological security, meaning a sense of future. And those things are education, sense of self, right? And parenting. Now, if you take those and you take the countries that used to have 98 per 100,000 and 71.5 per 100,000, that's Colombia, Nicaragua, all of these countries that were really ranked up there who are no longer in the top 10 and having a laugh. And we are now in the top 10, all of us here in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Trinidad, Belize. We're top 10 people. If you look at those people, they applied primaries. They had a commissioner of police who became like a social worker, you know. They had, like, everybody just went on the ground and just came together. No bickering, no, oh my God, it's heavy. People put their shoulders. Governments facilitated, governments listened and facilitated, and all of these countries have come down. South Africa, I mean, thank God they had a World Cup. So, I mean, they had a little bit of boost. But South Africa is no longer the country where police are killed the most and police kill civilians the most in the world. It's back to Jamaica, right? So we have the secondaries. The secondaries are the ones that get the government ready for election. The visitors, like, launch big things and jump out in the street and tap their chest like King Kong and say, we've done stuff. Those things are important because they have immediate effect and they make people feel better. So even while you're doing the primaries, you also have to boast a little and do a little that people know, because if people don't see things happening and they only see kids going to school, they'll feel that nothing is happening.
Yes.
So the PR of it.
Yes.
So the PR section is good. And then there's a tertiary, which is about teaching people how to cope. But if you're coping with something, you're likely not to want to change it immediately because you're coping. But you need all 3 operating at the same time. So it's a science in dealing with violence. And what we're finding in Jamaica, in Belize, in Trinidad, in St. Kitts, these are the worst countries, in the US Virgin Islands and other countries that have had violence from the last 5 years, is that everybody pitched things towards the secondary. You don't see the education system in Belize changed yet. Professor Errol Miller has almost got emotional here, asking the state to shift away from the standard system and join the rest of the world where school ends at 18. These are basic things. If you can get the state to move from its responsibility from 14, standard ends about 14, right? To 18, you're already providing your kids with a greater chance, a greater frame of education. If you can find the 5%, usually about, in every war zone, including Belize, usually there are about 5% of mothers who have no support system. You can find them, strip them down, as in support them and make their families into units. Remember that kids can't be poor, it's their families that are poor. So you can't take a child in the street and I'm going to adopt you and then send it back home to a hungry belly.
You have to help the parents.
You have to help the parents.
Yeah.
You have to focus on helping the mother. You have to teach the father how to support the mother. Right? I mean, I'm the head of Fathers Inc. I make no joke about it. Fathers are secondaries. Mothers are primaries. When you're talking about violence reduction, this human species is cross-sectional. Very funny word. It means that you are connected to your daughter more than you are connected to your son. And it's not because anybody teach you, it's because nature said so. A boy is preoccupied with what happens to his mother. If his mother gets hungry, you could get hurt. So what we do in countries that are really doing well is we make sure you don't have this 5% of mothers floating around, getting up every day, not telling the boy I'm hungry, but yawning widely. And the boy can see the white squally, as we call back home, on her mouth and see her sleeping because she's tired, and the house is dirty because she doesn't have the energy to clean it. And he goes, and let's use the Belizean word, he goes catch and kill. Now, if you have that happening, you have to address your welfare. And once you're addressing your welfare, your murders are going to go down. So the kids are in school. First of all males between 6 and 18 must be in school. You have to have over 90% of your boys at that age in school if your violence is ever going to go down. So you have to have a system, a long-term 15-year plan that says we're going to do this. And then the suppressions make sense.
Doc, as you say that, there's one factor that I think, again, we keep on stepping around in these analyses, which is that you spoke about these three factors, and the second one is like the PR. Everything in Belize is politically controlled.
Yeah.
And the persons who determine what policy goes on are the politicians. So they decide whether or not we're going to fix streets or invest in these social partners. And for a politician, tier 2 is most important.
Yes.
It's the optics
Yes.
of it. What in Belize do you see that can assist us to wring some of that away from the political directorate? Because we haven't been speaking about the politician, and the silent hand in all of this is the politician who either, we just had a budget read, gives little money to it, we build roads and we don't deal with
Or
people.
implements crime-fighting strategies.
That don't work.
Yeah.
Right, but it
Or
doesn't,
hires a commissioner of police
right.
that is not effective. I'm not saying in our case that's...
but it doesn't work like that. I think if you're walking down the street one day and you see a fish walking beside you on the ground, you're going to be pretty shocked. In fact, you're going to probably run into a car and a car hits you. I think we tend to ask a fish, to be a man, and a man to be a fish. And we have as human beings, we have very weird demands in our heads. Once a person, I work, my office is actually right next door to Norman Manley Law School, out of which most of the politicians come. And I'm preoccupied in watching them very meticulously. And they have a particular type of personality. They have a particular type of DNA. These are not the people you ask to do things. These are the people you dictate to come election time. And a lot of Caribbean people don't understand how you get things done. Elections are coming, you get these things on the agenda. These are the things we're voting on. So you have power, you're not powerless. So it's the other way around. But the point is, somebody has to pick up, some middle class person with at least a degree who can read and write, has to pick up this thing and say, I am going to become an activist. And better yet, a bunch of people come together to say, these are the things we want. We want your education system to go up to 18. We want the 5% of families we expect to be in trouble that will produce repeat killers, because they do.
Yeah.
Because when a mother or a father is hungry and the children are hungry, they torture the children because they're frustrated. You're seeing these people who are educated being frustrated and attacking each other. Can you imagine the ones that are hungry? So in other words, it's the people who must put these things on the agenda. Yeah. Otherwise, the politician will politic. That's what you put him there to do, to politic. And then you turn around and blame him for being himself. Right?
I think that's one of the things that we can say about our country, that we are fairly passive. We are passive.
Very.
And not very cognizant of the power that we possess. Huh?
And you quarrel after you've done the bad things.
Let's look at this from a different perspective. I find that we are the word being used right now is responsive to issues. We've had several representatives from the police on the show. And one of the things I cannot clearly hear from them is evidence that they possess to not justify, but to understand the multiple strategies that they've invested in the past couple of years. We have not seen a turning point in violence. We've not seen a turning point, I'm wrong, because now children are being killed, and women and mothers just because, and they're the intended target, not people who caught a stray bullet. how important is it that we understand the root of the problem before investing in whether it is emergency zones, addressing crime together, military on the street? Is that perhaps a part of what is missing in this equation?
Right, but I go back to a point where there's a question about how do you assess me? Let's say I'm a politician temporarily. How do you assess me? You give me 5 years and you want instant results. Violence is measured in 15-year blocks.
Yeah.
You put me in power for 5 years. You want answers in 5 years. What am I going to give you? Secondaries. I'm going to give you stuff that makes you feel good and go home like an idiot.
Feel like I'm doing something. No, people aren't buying it anymore. So.
Right. And you're going to feel good. See, the big man do that and the big man do that. But the point is, and this is why, this is where you come in. It's about having programs, little clips of programs that educate people, that puts pressure on, because you're civil society, that puts pressure on the government to say, this is the direction I want to see. I've been to places where people say, we want a school for boys. Like in some, the entire region has more space for girls than for boys.
We've had this conversation.
Whether we like it yes or no, and even if some of my feminist friends get into the spirit on the Lord's Day, the point is, in Jamaica, for example, there are 15 all-girl schools and 7 all-boy schools. It's not even 50%. So, and this was, by the way, a strategy of the Britons. They knew exactly what they were doing because it's not that women were competing with the white men. It was men who were trying to compete. Notice the word trying to compete. And therefore, they shut them down by education. Every single Caribbean state should be in the process of eroding that trend set by the Britons. But they're not. And we're not demanding.
In Belize, that's only 2 to 1.
I know the figures.
And when we get to tertiary level.
I know the figures very well.
No, but not even the all boy, all girl. I mean, just the completion rate. We know less boys are coming, less men are coming out of tertiary institutions. So I find that, and you speak of education being a part of the answer. We didn't even talk about the relevance of the education that we get. But I want to bring it to a closer social issue. You've seen the GSU video from over the weekend, have you?
No, I haven't seen it, but people have given me the details.
Okay, so you've gotten the rundown.
To the point I don't need to see it anymore.
So I want to talk about something that we haven't discussed publicly, which is I find a lot of people very concerned of the involvement of women in the video, in what they've said, in what they've dictated, and how they responded. And I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong, but I think when you hear a woman say, empty a clip, or intervene, whether it's a mother, a sister, or a community members, it takes me back, and I have this burned in my memory in your voice, when you said, mothers, hug your boys. And it was such a basic action. So simple, I think people may have overlooked it. Are we still seeing a part of this problem being the lack of mothering of our young boy children?
Yeah. I go back to the point where by the age of 12, you are designed to die for your mother. Whether you like it or no, this is the human species, right? And by the age of 12, your father makes or break you. If your father does real bad things as you enter puberty, it affects everything, whether your sense of self, everything. In fact, there are 17 benefits you get from being close to your father. Boys get 4. But boys get 20 odd from their mother. So it's your mother. Your life is your mother. That is why in this region, if you tell somebody to do something to their mother, they get really mad.
Yeah.
Right? You can tell them about their father and they go, oh, whatever. But people have, in ignorance, written this thing about the boy is fatherless. And because the boy is fatherless, then that is why he goes and kills. You know, people like to blame all kinds of single factors as if nothing is complex. And in fact, the top achieving students around the world are fatherless. Ben Carson's fatherless. I can list them for you. They're fatherless, which means it's nonsense. So in other words, even though fathers bring to the family tremendous sense of security, sense of confidence, sense of of affirmation as in being a man and all of these things, your entire, like literally 87% of your emotional construction is your relationship with your mother. And shooting people is an emotional act. People not getting these things.
But break it down for us. How does it get there?
In other words, if mothers are not empowered to be able to find the space to hug their sons, to treat their sons, not as pawns, not as, oh my God, I'm hungry, please go hunt me food, and so forth, but as a child. You see, I like to remind people there's no word in the English language for a child dying before a parent. If you die, the child becomes an orphan. But if the
your
child
spouse dies, you're a widow, but
you're
your
a widow,
child
but there's
is
nothing, because your child is not supposed to be without parents. And so these are the things we're asking people to get back to the basics of parenting. Like I've asked neighbors in some countries that, look, if you see your neighbor's children becoming a gangster, intervene. When you cook, give a little food. You know, don't wait for the don up the road to give him a shilling. You give him the shilling. That is the essence of where it is, because a lot of mothers are struggling.
Yes.
They're hungry themselves. And believe, when you're hungry, it's hard to mother or parent.
Dr. Gayle, how much of this is cultural? When we talk about wanting to build a strong young man, there's an interesting, I always found it interesting when we looked at the exclusive breastfeeding statistics, and I don't have it, the updated one.
I can summarize it for you.
It was interesting to note that more baby girls were exclusively breastfed than baby boys in Belize. So there is something from a baby's, and we're talking the first 6 months of life, where I'm willing to give my breast milk to my baby girl more than my baby boy.
Yes, I can tell you why.
Why?
Jamaica is actually worse. I think Belize is about the third worst.
Yeah.
Trinidad's a little bit better, but all the war zones have the same statistics, where you're talking about the UNICEF 2004 and 2012 studies. They show that girls are twice more likely to be breastfed than boys, fully breastfed, which gives them all the amino acids, which makes them strong. And remember that boys are more fragile than girls. Let me say that again. Boys are more fragile than girls by nature. Girls are more resilient. They're born smaller and they're more resilient. But here's what happens. If you're in a war zone, you want from birth, there's something in your head that you can't make this little boy into a sissy too much. You're sucking too much, shut up. So you start to toughen the child before, can you imagine, before even 6 weeks of age, the mothers begin to toughen these boys. The neglect starts because they are automatically in their heads preparing these kids for the hardship they are going to face out there, because they know these kids are going to go down the street hungry and beg somebody $1, and the person's going to say, go away from here. So the child has to automatically get the understanding of rejection on these things, while they already know that these girls are going to have a protected life, because the more violent you become is the more you protect your girls, is the more you send them to university. People don't see the connection, but there is. Once you're a war zone, girls will flourish, even whilst they're mourning and so forth.
Is there an expectation of death of the male counterpart?
Yes, that's the point. And you're not certain how much you can invest in this thing that is going to die. That is where the problem is. It's in your DNA. Remember how long we've been in this violence. We've been in long enough for it to now sink into our DNA, for us to be unconsciously making it worse without knowing.
Is it time for I don't like to use the word paradigm. Is there time for a policy shift?
Yes.
Marlene and I have always had this conversation, which is that if you look at Belize over the past 20 years, we have designated and invested everything into women. We have a women's department, women's issues network, the schools, everything, single mother programs. Is it time to do something which will be psychologically and emotionally unpopular? And to start to invest in men, to start to say, listen, men's department, let's start to invest in policies that encourage fatherhood and that sort of thing. Is it time for a radical shift?
It doesn't need to be radical, it needs to be fair. I've said to people, If you can provide young men with 50% what you provide young women, your murders will be chopped. What is happening to young men in the Caribbean is extremely brutal. It's actually criminal.
Yeah.
In fact, we have got to a point where people can't even send prisoners in some countries back home because they don't even have prisons, because it's the space for men that they just bundle on each other. I mean, there's stuff I can't even say to people because I don't want to ruin their day completely. Just a little bit, just for them to think. If for every dollar that is spent on women in the Caribbean, 50 cents can be spent on men, the murders within 5 years will begin to recede in the entire area. It is that bad.
But what is the point of intervention? I find it's difficult for me to think of what the reality is for young men in this country, in this city, in the South Side. There are those who are perhaps already involved in gang activity. And they say very clearly, there is never a way out.
That's not true.
That's what they say. They say, I'm saying from past interviews, that they'll say, okay, I reform my life, I start working with an NGO, I start doing some advocacy, I turn things around, and one day when I'm walking to work because I feel like I'm finally having a new life, my bad choices come back to haunt me.
Yeah.
That's a fear that they do have.
Yeah.
There is also those who, I've been saying it repeatedly on the show, who are already in prison. They've never been involved in crime, maybe minor crimes, but they can't leave the 3-block radius that they live in. They're imprisoned. They can't go to a school on the other side of town, so if there's no school in their area, that's it. Where do we intervene with these young boys, young men, to really, and I know this is a horrible question, but to make the most impact now?
Well, first of all, at some point we have to update our audit of the situation.
Okay.
But let's take a person who's at prison, right? I've just had the chance to talk to John Woods again. One of the things that can be done is to educate them in prison, as in a full-scale frame of education in prison. That's one way out. With the gangs on the streets, as you are beginning to soften the reasons people get into gangs, because again, it shouldn't be symptomatic. We shouldn't go at the fire. We should go at the base of the fire. This is what you guys have been saying. So one of the things is, as we reduce the reasons people go into gangs, as we get to families and make sure families are stable and so forth, the families themselves will put pressure on the other families to allow my child to live. But it's about going at the root of it. It's about spending at least 50% of your money on the primaries, making sure your kids are in school, making sure families are okay, spending the money, making sure, and not taking on large groups. What I see happening in Belize is that there are lots of splinters of people taking on stuff they can't. They full their mouth and then they're choking. Take on, let me give for example, at Children First, which is the biggest agency in the region. We are now at 21,000 children. We reached 21,000 young people with buses driving around and reaching them across the country. But in home, we have 1,000, and that's all we have space for. Even if 10,000 come, we look at the 1,000 most vulnerable and we work with those. And that's rescuing any areas you see that operating, that rescues it. Then we have PMI and CSJP who are also operating. If you pull these people out, PMI is Peace Management Initiative.
That's in Jamaica.
In Jamaica. If you pull those out, our homicide rate is 60 per 100,000. Hell high. When you pull those out, it will just blow, right? So you need to have a network as intricate as that working here, because it would have greater effect because you're smaller and you also have greater willpower than most of the Caribbean countries. There's a lot of good stuff here. When you walk on the streets, people want to help. People see me. When I take the risk of walking in Belize alone, people come to me.
That's a risk.
No, it's a good risk. I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean, if I'm going from the hotel to the shop, I don't get there very quickly because people,
We'll stop and talk.
people hold me by the hand. So you can't run. You can't get a chance to go get your stuff and go get back. And they say, what are we going to do? And so forth. I hardly get that anywhere else except back home in Jamaica and here. People want to help.
But we don't know how. I find that people don't know how.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's exactly and that's why I'm also challenging you guys to begin to give people clips. 5-minute clips. People don't learn things too much after 5 minutes. You give them a 5-minute clip, if you could design a program like that, a 5-minute clip on how to deal with violence, people will watch it because people watch television here, I find, right? Then there's a lot of cable going on, but they also watch your programs. So everybody needs to pitch in to say, let's see if we can get this thing moving forward, because at the end of the day, it's a concerted effort. Believe me, if you ask any of my friends in South Africa, you remember where they were? You're old enough to know where South Africa were. They were frighteningly up in the 70s and 80s. People used to talk about South Africa and Colombia, right? They were called the mothers of violence. Now, the homicide rates, let me tell you, 26 and 21 per 100,000.
Yeah. And change is possible. We have multiple
have
examples from this region.
We have to be patient because they did not go by suppression. They did not have big suppression units and so forth operating. They had those operating, but the emphasis was on the primaries because they finally accepted that it was the primaries. And here's my warning for Belize. People tend to accept that it is the primaries they should go at when the homicide rate hits 60, 70, 80.
And your primaries would be like your
Education,
suppression.
Parenting.
Education, parenting, and these things. Having stuff reminding people that you're a human being. Running little things like a 30-second ad on television. Today you get up, you're a human being, love everyone. People don't know that these things help. These are primaries. They're making people realize, oh, yeah, I'm a human being. Somebody loves you. May sound like Care Bear, but you need a propaganda machine. It's actually a propaganda.
I love propaganda.
I love propaganda, yeah, because we have all kind of bad propaganda, right? Why can't we have good one? But these are the kinds of stuff that have been done in countries to make people's sense of self return.
Doc, you just described the church. So in essence, you're saying that the church has been failing.
The church has a tremendous role. A study we found
You're going to dodge that one.
How many churches, I'm trying to remember how many churches we found in Belize that were doing, that the youth respected. I think it was about 3 or 4.
How many programs do they have?
Bad. That's bad. Yeah. So the churches need to get on board and spend some of the offering.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Spend some of the offering, man.
Of course.
And
let me tell you
invest
this
in
much.
little clips on television, and radio, reminding people. Remember that men are not dual. We can't watch television and do things. So radio makes a lot of sense to men as well as television, right? So these little things the church needs to do, not, where crusade, come, we need your soul. It sounds like an alien, you know what I mean? I've always said to the church, back the book of Isaiah. True religion is ensuring that people are not hungry. Yeah. That's the fast, that's the fast. I want you to fast. Yeah. When I'm you come and visit me. When I'm hungry, you feed me. When I'm chasing down the road, you run with me and ask me, why am I running? Yeah. That's the essence of the church.
If you went to a Catholic primary school, which many people have, you learned the Beatitudes. That's pretty much the principles that we're talking about here. I believe yesterday the commander said that he has made an effort to reach out to the churches because he does feel that they have not been involved enough.
But the church has to pass the line of ritualization, where every day, every Sunday or every Saturday or whichever day, you turn up and you go, Lord, I'm here. Yeah. We have to become activists.
And not ostracized as well.
And the church must have meetings in the streets. Yeah. Men don't like buildings. Go out into the streets. Camp out into the streets, get permission from the police, find yourself in the streets. That's
Can I ask you one question that bugs me? You've seen that there is a new strategy to address the crime in Belize at this point. The intent is to put in place emergency zones and also more military, or the BDF has been deployed into the streets. Do you feel this will help?
It's called suppression. Again, suppression only works if primaries are strong. Remember, you can use force on me only if I agree that the force is justifiable. Otherwise, you are declaring war. If I say you are unfair in coming at me, right? Then when you come, there will be, let me put it in the resistance. But if you are suppressing and you are changing your education system to match the rest of the world so that I can see that you are responsible for my education, if you are expanding monies, multiplying it by like 200%, doubling, tripling monies for parenting groups, setting up massive groups like similar to Children First and all of these things, I can see that as a human being, that you're doing all of these things for me and I'm still being naughty.
Yeah.
So therefore, the suppression is justifiable. But if the only thing you have in that frying pan is a piece of fat and no food.
But then oftentimes social programs are not sexy for politicians. I mean, at the end of 4 years when I started my campaign, even if I have been investing in homes, show, because it is a long-term solution.
Oh, there is. There is. I mean, politicians, I've seen politicians in other countries use testimonials. You know, people come up and say, my entire family get help. And it works.
Yeah.
But people are lazy. Suppression, you snap your finger, you get results. You put the soldiers all over the place and people get into fear and they say, Ballet, we have to hold on until next week. Wait them out. Right?
It's a wait game.
But guess what? During the waiting, people feel good until the soldiers and everybody get tired, and it
Things
comes
flare
back.
back
You're actually against militarization, bringing in the military to the streets. I think
No, I think if things get really, really bad, you have to have them to hold things so it doesn't escalate any further.
Yeah.
But the formula that you...
But I'm saying to you, if I put you up on the rail, right? You're a strong man, and I put you up on the rail, and we all leave you inside here. We're expecting to hear tud because you really can't stay there forever, right? At some point, you're going to get tired. And I'm saying it is more realistic if we want to get up there for us to begin to build ladders to get up there. So even though suppression is extremely necessary, it's a necessary evil. It is not your aim. And today, what I want to do, my ambition as a government is to suppress crime. That can't be it. Your ambition should be
So the next question
to
should be
reduce crime. And crime reduction comes from the primary. And crime reduction principle says if you're getting more than 3% reduction per year, you're not doing well. It should be very tiny, almost invisible. I leave Belize, I come back in 5 years, let's say we do that. When I come back, it's, you leave and go on a trip, you come back, it's lower, you're in shock. That's reduction. Not you come back and there are people all over the streets marching and militarizing, and then of course the gangs get better guns because your guns look big.
Match them, yeah.
Right? Because if you march on the street with weapons, every state has a limitation with the kind of weapons they can buy, but gunmen don't have limitations. So there are limits to what you can do with suppression. So it's necessary, let me just point out, it is necessary, but it is not the primary.
It is not a long-term solution that we
it's
can
just to
look at.
hold.
I appreciate how much you have invested in understanding this problem in Belize and working with many different agencies. In fact, you just concluded a conference with a UN agency. Tell us what you can tell the public in terms of what we need to change in our mindset in understanding the violence in this country.
Well, the first thing is that we have to begin to work slowly. We're trying to go too fast. It's like having your tea and you go too much and some gets in your trachea and you choke. That's what I'm seeing. People are getting fussy. People are getting moany. Just moan so much that they forget that Belize is one of the top 20 countries with resources in the world. Let me remind people, you live on a small piece of this massive land. You're 2.5 times the size of Jamaica, right? You have loads of resources. A lot of people who are making this big fuss could simply go farm, right? You have resources. The point is that you don't have a population big enough yet to make complete what we call economy of scale of your resources. So that's a problem. But you're growing. There is tremendous hope that you'll get to this point one day. So people need to be patient. But you also need to be guiding your politicians, because politicians must politic. Yes? But you have to have more power in yourself. In other words, Belizeans have to feel more empowered. In the morning, pull your neighbors together. Yes? The time people are talking about, what are the things I see people watching now? Cushy and all kinds of different things on, and I see people watching so much cable and stuff. Take an hour out of every day and pull your neighbors together and begin to create activity. Like I've been to countries where people say, it's 8 o'clock, where are your sons? And I'm happy I saw it on your TV. I saw ads coming in, the kinds of ads I want to see. But this is the kind of concerted effort I want from people. It's 8 o'clock, where are my sons? Knock up your neighbor, where are our sons? Right? And I'm seeing mothers walking in the streets, we're here for our sons. And of course, if mother come for son, you can't do anything because mother have emotional blackmail. I put you here and take you out. You understand? And the fathers backing the mothers in this thing. It's going to have to be a neighborhood watch. It's going to have to be a neighborhood responsibility. It's not going to be top down. It has never been top down anywhere. Even Colombia, where people praise the government so much for going at the gangsters and so forth. Believe me, that's not what changed Colombia. It's the mothers, it's the fathers, it's the neighborhoods that really swelled. But we have in the morning and begin to feel more empowered, that we are not so depressed.
Let me ask my final question, which is that in Belize, we have a talking culture. We watch a talk show in the morning.
Caribbean.
And we call in, we rip it, and then 6 o'clock we watch Marlene in the evening.
Therapy.
We get we get frightened or annoyed, and then we go back to sleep, and the cycle starts again.
Yeah.
I hear what you say.
Tertiary. That's what is tertiary.
I heard what you said in terms of what needs to be done. But what if somebody who said that's a lot of theory? That's not the way. Nobody's going to get up once a day and go and get their neighbors together. This is culturally the opposite direction we'll be going in. We're the iPad generation. That we look at our iPad, we watch our news, and we go back into our cocoon.
And do selfies.
Or the hashtag generation, where we feel that if we put it online and say, I don't agree, that's enough.
Yeah.
So it's this third party sort of solution, solution-based approach. What practically? Because, I mean, some people have even argued that, listen, maybe your approach have even, the silent effect of it is that it's because it creates a lot of conversation. So we are in the talking, and in all the talking, we don't practically do anything. What practically, and maybe it's a hard question, but what practically can we do based on the way the culture currently is and what our expectation practically can be to get something?
I'm making that you have to get up. Remember, culture.
Let's assume that won't work.
Yeah, stay with me. Remember that culture is ritualized practice. You get up every day and you do what is logical to help you survive for that day.
Yes.
And I'm saying to people that violence requires to think beyond today. That is why I use the word ontological security. If you are living for today, you are not living. You are existing. Big difference. And therefore the mindset of people, violence has never been reduced without people getting up automatically and saying we're doing something. I have no example. I'm sorry, I can't find you any example where the Lord came down and said, you are good boys and good girls, right? It is the neighborhood that must activate.
Yeah.
It must be at least one crackhead, and I'm calling good crackheads, not like me, who get up in a community and say, you know, today I'm mad and I want to change. I've seen a community change because a revival woman tied up her head and walked through that community and called out every single person with a gun. Saw this with my eyes. And says, bring the gun to me. You're scared of me, aren't you? Yes, because I can talk to the Lord. And that was the church, but the African church, walking the lane and saying, all of you, the Lord say you're going to die. Marky, I don't know if she had a but the point is, she had a message. And that group became a big group now that's helping people.
Yeah.
Somebody on the ground
we need activation, energy.
Has to do something. Believe me, if people sit and wait on government, nobody in government is poor. Half of any government in the region comes from law school. I can tell you that. Sit down and assess. If you take any government anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, between a quarter and a half come from a law school. They're not poor people. They don't understand, so you have to teach them. And they don't always have the humility to learn either, so you have to bump them in the side and say, pay attention to me right now. This is what is happening. But if you don't have the spirit of discernment, if you don't have the activism in you to get up and say, you know, knock on your door, we want this, right? If you don't have that, how are you going to expect these guys to get up and every day pick up a book and read how to reduce violence? You think they have that? They don't have that. They're administrators. By the time they get up in the morning, they have to sign papers. By the time the day is done, they throw themselves in the bed, and nothing is really done other than the same rituals of every day. A lot of politicians, a lot of young people I see go into politics and they tell me, Herbs, I promise you I'm gonna make changes. And when they go to paperwork, log them in, they start put on weight because they're eating food. And you see them walk and they look like they're already gone, right? Or they get really, really tired. That's politics, and believe me, that's a fair assessment of them. What we have to do in all the mess that they have, that they call their fancy lives, we have to bump into them and get them to understand through activism, through media, that this is the direction. You have a report. It has a recommendation page. It's the media who have to take little clips, do little loops, we call them, yes, in graphics. Do little loops from it and say, the report 2010, the report. And until somebody goes, oh gosh, these annoying people, let's just do something. That's how it gets done. It's the church, it's the community, it's the media.
Thank you for coming in. We appreciate you taking the time. This was a conversation we very much needed, and we hope that we've been able to offer people just additional information as to why we need to get up and do something as a community and not wait as we have been doing. Thank you very much, Dr. Gayle. We're going to go ahead and take a final break, and when we come back, we'll have our wrap-up, so stay tuned.